Well, good afternoon, our beloveds. We are here with our another who is making peace with her current circumstance. Now, our question is, how many of you would be willing to make a decision that goes against your grain because it dramatically helps another person? So if, for example, you met a person who was suicidal and had no place to go, would you offer that person a place in your home, allowing them to disrupt your flow, your efficiency, your patterns? Would you be willing to put somebody else's needs ahead of yours when you know it's kind of life or death? Now, what about your children? Would you allow your children to live with you forever until they perished or you transitioned because they were struggling? Or would you engage in tough love, forcing them out on the streets and forcing them to experience even more terror and horror and fear? The answers to these questions tell us a lot about who you are. Now we know who you are. But nonetheless, we ask because we want to point out some of the flaws that you have been taught to accept, which is number one, when you see people struggling, that society will somehow help them. The fact is, it won't or they won't. Because if your construct was true, there wouldn't be so many unhoused people. Where did our generosity end to bring in those who need support because somehow we think it's somebody else's job? We have outsourced compassion, support, meeting the needs of others because somehow we think that our government is to do it instead of the individuals. Now, the second question that we asked is on what the role of parenting is. Many of you believe that if your children don't leave the nest at 18 and succeed, that somehow you failed as parents. But maybe the world operates differently these days. And what worked 20, 30, 40 years ago no longer works. Maybe you are, once again, meant to have multiple generations living within one home so that the grandparents and the aunties and the uncles can see the young ones growing up. Just think about, from a perspective of support and neglect on the other side, how much having multiple generations living in one compound would be helpful, assuming everybody does their part and is kind and justifiably supportive. How would that look if a mom had to work late, if a dad had to leave town? We would all pitch in and support the raising of this intergenerational family structure. We would also be there to support our aging parents and aunties and uncles in having a safe place until they transitioned. Can you see what we're talking about? The indigenous have a belief that multi-generational living is healthy, is appropriate, and is natural. Think of the animal kingdom. Sometimes the herds expand, and sometimes they contract as individuals leave to start their own herd. But it is not this get out because you are of the age of consent. And who made 18 the age of consent? Brains don't fully develop until about 27 based on medicinal tracking. However, we would tell you now that you are living longer. 43 for men, 37 for women. That is when you are fully formed, meaning that you need the support of the elders until that time to help you to navigate life. You were not taught these things because in prior generations, you died off before this was an issue. But because you are now living longer and attempting to live more consciously, carefully, compassionately, we are now sharing what the ideal communal living looks like. And no, it doesn't have to be a hippie compound where you do massive amounts of drugs and share one another's bodies. It can just be like it was on the old homestead, where grandma and grandpa and all the siblings and all the grandbabies lived somewhere on the property. And you need not live in the same home, just on the same compound. Now, the reality is that many of you do not like your families of origin because their belief systems and their ways of living no longer align with yours. But family need not be of blood. It can be of your choosing as well. So if you had to create a compound and invite 10 to 20 people to join you, who would they be and why? And maybe begin to think about that as an alternative to living in a retirement community where staff who is paid minimum wage takes care of you at the most minimal level because they are overworked and underpaid. So if you could create the ideal living until you transition experiment, what would that look like given the information that we just gave you? Build a new construct and dream a new dream into existence where Republicans and Democrats and Libertarians and the Greenpeace Party and anyone in between could harmoniously live together. What unites you more than it divides you? That is your ultimate question. How could you pull this off where you all just lovingly accept one another and support your very unique journey without displacing anyone who has the capacity to grow into a better human being? Think creatively, think compassionately, think collaboratively. The 3 C's. And so it is. Namaste.